What's up, Jake? How you doing?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be on here with you. Been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah, same over here. And let's start by you telling us a little about yourself, how many kids you have, how long you've been married, things like that.
Absolutely. So this summer, my wife and I are going to be celebrating our 15th wedding anniversary, which is exciting. And kind of an extension of that. So it'll be our 20th anniversary since we first met. And so I kind of tell people that at this point right now, I have officially known my wife for half of my life. And so this summer, it will officially be more 1 year more than half of my life that we've known each other, which is kind of exciting. That's kind of the I like to tell people that that's the ultimate flex right there. But we have three kids. We have a daughter who is 22. She's older, which was actually my wife's daughter from a previous marriage that I've now adopted. And then we have twin boys that are 13. So, never a dull moment in our house.
How's that going, by the way? That's the beginning of teenage years. How's it going with the guys?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I mean, my boys are great. I mean, obviously they're typical 13-year-old boys, but they're good kids. We have a blast. I mean, it's one of those things where, we have a really good balance of, I mean, obviously, like, they understand, like, their boundaries and what they need to do and what they're allowed to do and not do, but we have fun. Like earlier today, whenever we got home, we were outside playing football and running around and racing each other in the yard and all that type of stuff. And then we grilled steaks and all that kind of stuff. We missed my usual steak Sunday by one day. We didn't get a chance to do it yesterday because of the weather. So steak Sunday got moved to Monday this week.
Oh, that's cool. It makes for a good Monday.
Absolutely.
And did you guys always know how many kids you wanted, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of funny because when my wife and I first met, of course, she had our daughter already. She was 2 at the time when we first met, almost 3. And so, as we didn't immediately start dating or anything, but it was kind of like we started to kind of get there. And so, obviously, I knew that it was going to be like a package deal, like if we ever did get married someday. And I always had in my mind that I was going to have 3 kids. And once we got married, my wife was like, "I'm going to be pregnant one more time," and I was like, "Well." But I want to have 3 kids. And she's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. And so it ended up working out, for the best. She got one more pregnancy. I got 3 kids. It was kind of funny. I joke around sometimes. So the day that I adopted my daughter officially was October the 1st. And then our boys were born the following January. So I always joke with people, I went from having no kids to 3 kids in like 3 months. So,
Wow.
it was a wild experience, especially with newborns, because our daughter had already gone past that stage by the time we had met, and so my first experience with newborns was with twins, and so it was kind of a trial by fire type of thing. But I mean, it was awesome. We've kind of adopted the philosophy that it's just one adventure after another. So
Okay. And was that a pain point, the number of kids? Because you mentioned that you wanted three and she was leaning more towards two, right? So,
yeah. I don't know. I don't even really know why. There wasn't a specific reason why I wanted 3 kids. It was just kind of always the number that I had, I guess, like, growing up. And there's nothing even significant about that number or anything like that. It was just one of those things where it was like, that's just what I envisioned. And so it was like, well, but I want to have 3 kids. And she's just like, well, I really, only want to be pregnant one more time. And so it's
uh,
like, I mean, it wasn't really like, I wouldn't say it was a pain point. And I don't even really, like I said, know why it was, you know, a discussion. It just was. And it ended up working out. We both got what we wanted, I guess. So
okay. I was lucky that way too because I didn't want more than two. And for me,
right.
that was it was a hard two. So like there's no question about having more. I don't remember exactly why I didn't want more than two. I feel like in my head it was more like, oh, more than that, it's gonna be too much to juggle, you know?
Sure.
3 on 2 type of thing, you know?
Absolutely.
And for my wife though, she said, "Oh, kind of want three though." But it wasn't for her, it wasn't like, "No, we have to have three or else this is not gonna work." And
Right.
since for me it was more rigid, a rigid two, then we ended up, sticking with two. And she actually ended up being happy with that we didn't go for a third one. She's very happy with the dynamic that we have, a boy and a girl. They're close in
Sure.
age, 2.5 years between both. So that's I got lucky.
Yeah, I think those types of things, they always have a tendency to kind of work out one way or the other,
Yeah.
and I mean, sometimes there's, a plan that we don't really know exactly what it is, but it ends up working out. And we sit back after the fact and we say, okay, well, it worked out for the best. I didn't know what I was talking about anyway.
Okay. How much did you guys talk about it, about having kids in general before you got married?
Quite a bit actually, because well, I mean, obviously my wife already had, our daughter. And so one of the things we talked about early on was, obviously, you know, if you get me, you're getting both of us, right? Like I mentioned, it's a package deal. And so that was really significant because it allowed a couple of things to happen. One, it allowed me to see what she was going to be like as a mom, right? Because that's a huge thing. When you're looking to marry someone, you're not just thinking about your wife, but you're thinking about the future mother of your children. And so for me, I already got to see what she was like as a mother, and you know, I was blown away. Like I was like, man, she's amazing. She's a great mom. She always is taking care of her daughter. She's always spending time with her. She makes her a priority and all these things. And so I knew from the beginning that she was going to be a great mom. So I wasn't worried about that.
Okay.
But she also got to see me, as we were starting to get more and more serious and how I was interacting with our daughter. And she got to see what I was going to be like as a dad, because if you're a single parent, you kind of have to think about that anytime you think about getting into a relationship with someone. And so, that part was kind of nice because we were both able to see that before we ever even really talked about marriage, even just when we were dating, at
Mm.
first. And so that was a big one. And then we started talking about kids. I mean, obviously, once we got married and we kind of niched out, like, where we were going to live and those types of things, we started talking about having kids fairly early on.
Okay.
I don't know necessarily why, but I always kind of had the idea that I wanted to have kids, like, I mean, young is a relative term, but like on the younger side, just because it's like, well, I always had the vision of like, you know, being outside and playing and playing basketball and playing football and those things. And like now that our boys, which are our youngest kids, they're 13 and and I'm still outside, like, we're out there sprinting and racing and playing football. And tomorrow I take my boys, we go a few days a week into the gym, and we work out together. And and I
Nice.
can do those things. And so that was another thing. And my wife was definitely on the same page. She obviously, having already had one, she didn't really want to wait, a super long time, because the longer the age gap is, the harder it is for them to kind of connect and those types of things. And so it kind of was a natural progression, I think, because we really were able to be on the same page about some of the really key things before we ever even really got married. So
Okay. And you got that way through conversation, or it just so happened that you found the right person? And how much, like, because you mentioned you were on the same page for a lot of things, but like, how much can you be on the same page? And it just turned out that you both were aligned amazingly for all aspects of parenthood and marriage.
it's funny, like, I mean, I wouldn't say that we are 100% aligned on everything, right? I mean, there's definitely differences. I mean, no two people are going to be 100% alike, and nor would you want that.
Right.
I've written about that in the past, and I talk about that with people sometimes whenever I talk with them. I think of marriage as like a colander, like a kitchen strainer, right? Like if you have all of the same strengths and you're exactly alike, that means you're also going to have weaknesses that are the
Right.
same. And so, yes, you're going to catch, like if you put like the pasta in the strainer, you're going to catch a lot of the big stuff, but the water's still going to get through. It's like there's going to be things that slip through the cracks that way. And
Yeah.
so ideally you want someone who you have a lot in common with, but you also want someone who covers the things that you don't cover and that will help you see things from a different perspective that you don't always see, because then you don't miss anything. There's nothing that slips through the cracks that way. And so, we instantly hit it off. Like I knew I mean, ironically enough, I was dating someone else at the time when we very first met, and
Okay.
so it wasn't like it was love at first sight or anything like that. But it was, I knew that there was just something different about her, and I really didn't know at first. I didn't exactly understand what that was. I mean, I was also 19 when we first met, and so it was like,
Okay.
I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I just knew I knew that there was definitely something different and special about this woman, and so you know, I was not with the other person much longer than after we had met, and it wasn't solely because it just didn't work out. Well, we started spending more and more time together, and even at first, it wasn't even like we were dating. We just were always hanging out and stuff like that. And the one thing that I knew was like, this is someone like this is my best friend, like, and I didn't really even understand how to define it at the time. I was like, I just don't see myself really wanting to hang out with anyone else in the world as much as I want to spend time with this person. And it just kind of went from there. And one of the things that, and to this day, if you, and I know you follow some of the stuff that I write and you see a lot of the things that I put out there. You know that one of the big things that is huge on my list is honesty and being
Yeah.
open and honest about everything. And, we quite literally started that from day one when we first met, and because there was no like, I'm not trying to impress her, I'm not trying to start dating her, I have a girlfriend and all these things.
Right.
We were open and just bluntly honest with each other right from the get-go. And so then when it translated into, we started dating, and then it started getting serious, and the next thing you know, we're engaged, and we stayed engaged, and then we got married. It's like that just never left. We always just stayed honest with each other. And then there was a period of time in there which was not a great time for me, which definitely, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into at some point too, where I kind of fell off of that for a while, which was kind of the foundation of me wanting to start the account, to be honest. But it was always that thing where like we shared everything with each other, and so that was one of those deals where it allowed us to kind of touch on not just the easy stuff, but like the hot button issues, that are kind of those difficult pieces for people to kind of get aligned with. We had already talked about it. We already kind of knew where we fell on those things.
That's amazing how you mentioned that since day one you were both honest and open with each other. I don't think we can say that about most people, can we?
Yeah, no, I don't think so, because I think there's a certain level of, you want to show people only the things that you want them to see, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, every situation is different, and every couple is different, and everything that works for me wouldn't necessarily work for you, and I'm sure there's things that you have in your marriage that wouldn't necessarily work for me. But the one thing that I know for a fact, and I believe just to my core, is the fact that when I first met my wife, I did not immediately think that this is the girl I'm going to marry. Like, that was not something I thought about.
Okay.
And so what that did was, and I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but like, I wasn't trying to impress her necessarily. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I wasn't trying to only give her the parts that I wanted her to see, and she definitely wasn't doing that either. I mean, and we joke about it now. She's like, I was like in my early 20s and I had a kid. You were this 19-year-old kid. She would say, like, I was not worried about dating you whatsoever. Like, she was not. That was the furthest thing she was thinking about, and so she wasn't trying to impress me either. And so we had a very just pure and honest dialogue from the beginning, because there wasn't this extra stuff that we were trying to like get through. And so then once it did get to that point where we're starting to see each other differently, and we start dating and all those things, it's like, I'm not going to get rid of that part though. I'm not going to get rid of that, because I truly have the one person that I can be me. I can be fully authentic. I don't have to hide. I don't have to, do anything else. And it's kind of funny because like I'm pretty authentic, like with what I do and say online and stuff. Like, you've been in several of our spaces and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm me, like I'm always me. But at the same time, like there are certain levels to that, right? Like there are certain levels to how much of yourself you really show. And I mean, how powerful is it to know that you always get to come home to the person that you can give every part of yourself to, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between.
Yeah, you definitely come off that way, man. You don't seem the type of guy that can be fake.
Right. No, it's funny. I tell people like I don't. I mean, I'll schedule tweets some, like I'll plan things ahead of time some, but like I'm not one of these guys that's like planning things out weeks and weeks in advance because it's like what I write comes from either something that's happened to me in the past or something that's like going on recently. You know, like
Yeah.
I've been involved with it in some fashion. If you're seeing it on, my feed, or if you're seeing it in the newsletter, the stuff in the book that we're writing, like those are all lessons that we've gone through. These are not just fictional hypotheticals. They're
Right.
things that we've really done.
Right. Okay, cool. Look, you mentioned that it's been pretty smooth since day one. I mean, I'm sure there were some bumps along the road there. You want to get into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I'm pretty open about pretty much everything really. But so ironically enough, right around this time, 3 years ago, um, my wife and I were not in a good place at all. So, and to the point where like it was like probably not going to end well. Like we were like the talk of divorce was definitely thrown out there, and it was solely because, well, I won't say solely, that might not be the accurate way, mostly because of me not really taking care of myself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like all of the above. And just to give like just a quick like overview story, and some of this you might already know because I've written about this stuff too. But like, so in 2018, one of our boys had been diagnosed with leukemia, and so fast forward to 2020, he's great now. He rang the bell. He's in remission. He
Oh,
has
thank
no
God.
issues or anything. Right, absolutely. But what that situation, those 2 years of his treatment, the thing that it did to me was it put a lot of anger inside of me. Like I was angry with the world, angry with God, just why is this happening to my son? Like, why would this happen to our family? Those types of thoughts and things,
Okay.
which is something I think a lot of us might go through at various points in our life.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
it kind of sent me on like a bit of a spiral. I mean, there's no real other way to say that. Like I stopped taking care of myself. I stopped taking care of myself physically, like I said, emotionally. I was an angry person, and I was not a great husband and father, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. Like I say that openly. Like I was not. I was doing everything that I now try to help people not do. Basically, like I was guilty of all of those things. And like for example, like at one point, and people are kind of like shocked by this, I was almost 500 pounds at one point. And I was coming home and basically passing out on the couch, and I was not helping my wife. I mean, I was an absent husband and father basically.
Okay.
And like I said, it was literally around this time in 2021. Basically my wife was like, we're both teachers. So it's March right now. Most, the school kind of ends in May. Well, my wife basically is like, when the school year's over, so end of May, I'm taking the kids, like, we're gonna go because hopefully this major thing will be enough to sort of get you out of what you're doing to yourself. That's the only thing left that I know to do, is basically the conversation that she had with me.
Wow.
And looking back, I don't blame her. I mean, basically, I wouldn't have wanted to stay married to me at that point either, right? And so the best thing that possibly could have happened to me, I went into the hospital for 6 weeks. The first 3 of which I was in a coma. I got COVID pneumonia, and basically, I had gone to the doctor. I wasn't doing well. They sent me to the emergency room to get a rapid COVID test. Tested positive, and that's like the last thing I remember is calling my wife, telling her they're making me check into the emergency room. Basically, I woke up 3 weeks later in a totally different city, in a totally different hospital.
Damn.
And so, yeah, and I didn't know this until after, but at one point they basically told my wife he's got about a 30% chance to live. That's where he's at right now. And so it was crazy, crazy to even think about now. But so then I wake up, and then I basically spend the next 3 weeks in the hospital, like rehabbing. Like when you're in a coma for that long, you don't you have to relearn how to walk essentially because you're so atrophied at that point. Like your
Yeah.
muscle tone is all gone. Like I couldn't move my left arm. at first. I couldn't sit up on my own. I could not stand up on my own. I could not walk, any of those things. And so I had to relearn how to do all those things. So with all that being said, though, my wife was still there. Like she stayed, she was with me. And so, we basically, when I woke up, and of course, you're laying in a hospital and you can do nothing but lay there and think and realize all the things that you've done wrong, basically.
Yeah.
And that was the point for me where I was like, okay, I would clearly have made it through this for a reason. There's a purpose for this. I'm going to be better. I'm going to be a better husband. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to be a better friend. I'm going to be a better man. And that was the mission at that point, and it's never changed since then. And so,
That
I
was your
just started
wake-up call.
recovering. That was my rock bottom wake up call, 100% for sure.
Wow. Okay.
And my wife was there with me. Like she was coming to the hospital and staying with me, and seeing me. At those times, like only certain people can get it. Like I went 3 weeks and I only saw my boys once, and it was like, for like just a few minutes. In 3 weeks,
Right.
I saw them one time. And so we ironically enough, I got to leave the hospital to go home the day before our anniversary. So like it was like the craziest shit ever, right? And
Yeah.
so I basically, my wife, you talk about having like a lot of heart to heart conversations and a lot of tears and a lot of, just the full gamut of things. But it went back to all those things I was mentioning at the beginning, like being honest and open with each other. Cause I had stopped doing that, like I had got to a point where I was like half truthing, and I was in just such denial about everything at the time, which kind of, I wrote about this not that long ago. It's like, half truths and denial will kill marriages. And it almost did mine.
Right.
And so we made it through all that. And like I said, I made it my mission to improve in every way possible. And so, like, since that point, I've lost about 180 pounds since then.
Nice.
I've, yeah, I mean, our marriage is now better than it's practically ever been. My relationship with my kids is drastically night and day different than what it was before. And so, it's definitely not the way that you want to go through things, but
Sure.
for me, it was the beginning of the next phase in our marriage, and it was also the beginning of what became Dad Dynasty, basically.
That's amazing, man. It's such like the ultimate comeback story, turnaround.
Yeah,
And
yeah, for
and when
sure,
you
it really
did
is.
that, did you have to like did you sort of go back to who you knew you were, or did you have to like force yourself to be a new dad, a new husband? Or did you just it just sort of like went rewind to the time where, the real Jake is this, loving guy.
I think it was a little bit of both of those. Like, I feel like I definitely kind of went back to what I was like before, but it was a different version. Like I would say it was like an upgraded version, like Jake 2.0, if you will.
Nice.
And I say that because even before we started having like a lot of problems, I definitely don't think that I was nearly as like aware of really how to serve my family. Like I was very much living like, I won't say day to day, but like month to month. I would say more that way. Like I
Okay.
had no real vision of like the things that I'm teaching my kids, and the marriage that I'm building now is going to be the foundation for what will happen 50 to 100 to 150 years from now. I was not thinking that way at all.
Okay.
The other thing, I mean, not that this is necessarily like it's not necessarily like a religion talk necessarily or anything like that, but I definitely grew a lot in my faith through that period of time. I was definitely, just a much different person when it came to like my faith and stuff like that. And even just the amount of anger that I had towards the world was really gone and that type of stuff. And so, it was a lot of it was reverting back to the way I used to be, but an upgraded version because it was still very much different. And the other part that was kind of tough was, the fact that I knew my wife was ready to leave me played with my mind a little bit. Even I was almost like constantly like, "Are we
Ultimatum.
okay?" Yeah, I was like, "Are we okay? Like we're good, right? Like we're good. Like I promise I'm trying to do better, you know? So I was like almost like going the other way, like trying to do everything all at once. And, you know, like she would have to be like sometimes just be like, you know, like, honey, like calm down. Like, you know, I'm still here. I didn't go anywhere for a reason, you know? But it took a while. I mean, it took every bit of a year to probably get past that part, you know, because I just was constantly, you know, trying to right the wrongs. And it's like, well, you know, you really can't fully worry about that. You just have to start moving forward, you know?
Right.
And so, you know, and I mean, we are now, but I mean, like I said, it took a while.
Would you say that having gone through all these hardships that you did, almost losing your wife, um, your kid being sick, like seriously sick, your weight problems, all that, yourself being in the hospital, would you say that all these difficult moments in life made your marriage stronger, or was it just gonna head that way anyway, naturally?
I think I absolutely I think it made us stronger. You know, I mean, obviously in a perfect world, it wouldn't have taken all of those, you know, like tragic things to happen. But at the same token, like, you know, they did. So then it's like, okay, happens. What are you going to do about it? And for us, the one thing that it definitely has done for us is that there's zero doubts about where we are with each other, right? Like there is never a doubt about the commitment that I had to my wife or the commitment that she has to me. You know, and so the fact that we are together through all that is, I mean, yeah, there's no way to even really fully quantify that, I don't think, because, you know, and not that I would never wish these things upon anyone, obviously, but like, you know, when you go through things like that, there's really no real way to there's no way to not gain strength from that. You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of that whole thing. Well, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger type thing. Well, that's
Yeah.
literally, you know, literally and metaphorically, like that's kind of what happened. You know, like my son at one point when I was home, but I was still very much in the recovery phase. And he came and he sat by me on the couch one day, and I'll never forget this for as long as I live. And he just kind of looked at me, and he's very stoic, and probably because of like all that he's been through himself as well.
Yeah.
And you know, so he's very stoic, and he's kind of looked at me, and he wasn't joking. He was just very matter of fact. He's like, you know, Dad, we have something new in common. I was like, what's that, buddy? And he's like, we've now both almost died, but we didn't. And it's just like, man, like, and I was like, well, no, like, you know, you were fine. Like, you were always gonna be fine. He's like, not whenever I had my seizure. Like, I almost died because at one point he had a seizure during his treatment because of the chemo and stuff. And
Okay.
so it's like, you know, he remembers those things. And so it's like, you know, and he was like, I want to say at the time, like he would have been 10 at the time
Okay.
whenever he's telling me this. And so it's like, well, I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. We do have that in common, I guess. And so, you know, you
Wow.
get those little reminders like that. And sometimes it's like, you know, it's not something even now in our house, like we don't shy away from talking about those things, you know, like
Good.
we don't, it's not one of those things. And I know this is pretty common for in some families. I think even my parents kind of did this a lot growing up where it's like, well, if something bad happens, like, let's just not talk about that. Right. Like, let's push that aside. Like it's almost
Yeah.
like out of sight, out of mind. And I think there's a lot of people that do that because it's easier to just try to forget about it and, you know, and just sort of compartmentalize and those types of things. But like, and I talk about this a lot with the stuff I write about, and I talk with people about marriage. Like, you can't just push those things to the back burner because if you do, they're never fully going to go away. And so if you don't address it slowly, it's just going to keep building, and eventually it's going to blow up.
And you're not healing, basically.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Would you say that a lot of women would have stuck it out like your wife did with you in that difficult time? Because I feel like
Um,
the answer to that would be no. I'm curious to see your point of it though.
I would, I mean, I would love to say yes, but honestly, no, I
Well,
wouldn't think so.
if you look at the divorce
And
rate,
yeah, yeah, and I would
doesn't
say
seem
I
like
wouldn't
it.
even say yeah, I wouldn't even say just women. I would say most men would not, you know,
Or men, yeah. If the roles
stay
were
by
reversed,
their
yeah.
yeah, I don't think, you know, I mean, honestly, and I've had this conversation with my wife. Like, I was like, two things I've said to her, and it's so funny. We actually had this conversation last weekend, and I don't even know why it came up, but we just happened to talk about it. And, you know, it's just kind of what we do. We'll just throw it right out there.
Sure.
And so it was like, I was like, you know, I was struggling through life at 500 pounds. Like, there's two things that I think of. One, there's no way you could be proud to be married to me at that point. And two, there's literally no way that you could be attracted to me at that point. So it's like, I told her, it's like, I'm literally almost like astounded that you never had an affair. I mean, it's like, I mean, I'm doing it wrong. I'm glad you didn't, right? But it's like, but I mean, it's like, I'm shocked because it's like, you know, I gave you no reason to have faith in me. So it's like, but she didn't, and she stuck by me until she said that she was going to leave.
Mhm.
But even then, it was like, I'm not leaving you for someone else or anything. I'm just going. And even then, it was like, I still very much love you. I'm just hoping that by me leaving, that was going to be the rock bottom moment that would get you to snap back to reality type thing. But instead, there was another plan, and I have my own rock bottom moment instead. And she actually has shared with me, like, she's like, when you went in the hospital and they said that, like, you may not make it, like all of her family was freaking out and friends, everybody's freaking out. She's like, I was not. She's like, I was worried about you, yes, but there was almost like a sense of comfort because I knew that, like, this was what was meant to be. Like, this is what was going to get you this is what was going to give me my husband back, basically. And so
Wow.
she was as calm as you could be. I mean, relatively speaking, in that point. And so, I mean, I don't know. She's an amazing person. That's all I can say. I mean, I can't imagine there being, like you mentioned the divorce rates. Like, it's become so easy to just give up and start over, to the next new thing.
Why is
That,
that?
well,
Why
that's a
do you
great
think that
question.
is? I mean, I'm curious to see your thoughts on it, but like, is it me or people are just giving up a lot?
No, they
That
are. They absolutely are.
they are,
Absolutely.
right? So it's either I'm telling myself it's either that or people before they got married, they just didn't talk enough about what they wanted out of a marriage. Like, how much do
Yeah.
people discuss important things that you need to discuss before you get married and have kids? It doesn't seem like they
I
are.
they're no, they're not. And it's funny. This is almost could be the entire episode probably just on this one thing, which, and I know there's other stuff we're going to talk about, so I won't take the whole time, but just a few things that immediately come to mind for me. Like, first of all, the world is a lot different now than what it was 50 years ago. Divorce rates were not nearly as high 50 years ago as what they are now. And I don't necessarily know that that just means that all the marriages were great back then. I don't think that's all necessarily what it is.
I think it was taboo. Just back then, it was taboo to get divorced.
I think it was taboo to get divorced. I also believe that, there was a lot more, it was a lot more prevalent for men to work, women to be able to stay at home.
Yeah.
Whereas now you have way more. I mean, we're a double income home. My wife and I both work full time. I'm working on trying to retire my wife. I mean, that's why, aside from helping people, which is the number one goal, number two is I want to help my family financially. This is why I'm
Okay.
trying to build the things that I'm building online. But there's way more double income families now, and the world, it just seems like literally by the day is getting more and more insane. And so the amount of stress that couples are under now is, and I don't know that it's necessarily more. I mean, it's hard to say that, but it's definitely different. There are things that we are dealing with now that they were not dealing with 50 years ago, or definitely 100 years ago, And so I think the other part of it is everything is mainstream now with social media, with regular media. Before it was almost like, well, if we get divorced, what are we going to do? And it's like, well, now you got 5 million people on Instagram or TikTok telling you, yes, be divorced. You're better off being single and having no kids, and what they call them, dinks now, and all these types of things. And it's like,
Yeah.
you know, why? Like, when did that become a thing? I mean, I'm pretty sure that that was not the point behind creating social media, but that's the way that it's become. And so it's like, you add that with the instant gratification that we have in society now,
Yeah.
where everyone wants to just get quick fixes. No one wants to work hard for anything. I mean, that's the other part. Like, marriage takes work.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the hardest. It's the most rewarding thing you'll do, but it is also one of the hardest things that you'll ever do. I
For
mean,
sure.
because it's about sacrifice. Like, every day there is something that you are sacrificing for yourself, for your spouse, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I am sacrificing something for my wife. She is sacrificing something for me. That's not easy to do. I mean, it's worth it. We know that, but it's not easy. And I think people more and more are having a really hard time doing things that require work and effort. And I think that's contributing to it a lot as well, I think.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I think a lot of people have seen it too online, is that people are interested in self-improvement and self-help and trying to get better, but they won't actually do the work to get there. So you'll
Yeah,
have like these
absolutely.
online coaches who are trying to help people, and they're putting out content and they're offering their services, and then people are just scrolling right past it, going to the eating videos because that's more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny with all these like million copy sales of different self-help books and all these things. It's like, well, man, if we're getting all these book sales, why is there so many people that are struggling at life? Like
Yeah,
either they're reading it and not actually applying it, or they're just buying it and not actually reading it. I don't know which, but I do know that if more people were actually following the advice in those books that are being sold, then there'd be a lot more people that were in healthier
people will be amazing.
lifestyles.
Yeah.
Absolutely, exactly.
Marriages will be on fire and everybody will be happy, and
Right. Yeah,
that's what
that's
it feels like with all those, yeah, all those book sales, like you say. It's incredible.
yeah, I mean, you see all these books that get, like I said, million copies sold, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, where are all those people at? Like, what are they doing with all that knowledge?
So what
Um,
happened? Have we become so lazy that we don't want to put in the work even when it's about our marriage and our kids? Is
yeah,
it
I think
easier to give
so.
up? What does that say
I
about
think
us?
it, I think it says a lot. One of the things I think it comes down to is I was this was something that I was very guilty with as well. Um, for me, I was in a situation where, like I said earlier, I was in like denial about stuff. And so I feel like I was of the mindset like, oh well, it's not that bad. Like it's gonna work out. It's gonna work out. And so I just sort of kept pushing things aside, to think like because I thought, oh, everything's gonna be fine. And then but it wasn't. Like I was getting worse and worse. And I think that has a lot to do with it because I think people have this assumption that everything's just going to magically work out. And it's like, well, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It does take the work, it does take the effort. And without those things, you know, it's only a matter of time, really. It's a matter of time before things fall apart because, again, marriage is not easy. I mean, it's not like we are social, creatures. Like people need to be social. We need connection. We need all those things, but it's those day to day, like, well, I want to do this, but my wife wants to do this, or my wife is asking me to go do this around the house, but I wanted to go fishing today.
Mm.
Those types of things, and those are where those little things where it's like that um that takes time, and
Yeah.
that takes effort and that takes commitment because we have the patience, I think, as a people. We don't have the
Yeah.
patience to see the benefit of carrying through those things,
It's just easier to go through the most hardest divorce and paperwork and headaches with that. That's I don't get that. But you mentioned you're Jake 2.0 now.
Yeah,
Who is
absolutely.
Jake 2.0? What does that mean? Like, how does it take to be, what does it take to be a good husband where you are now as Jake 2.0?
So I think there's a few things that immediately jump out to me. I think first and foremost, I will always come back to the honesty piece. That's where it starts. And I think everyone understands. Oh yeah, yeah, honest. Yeah, you don't tell lies. Tell the truth. That's the easy part. When I say honest, I mean unapologetically honest. Like you can't hide stuff. If you're mad, man up, say you're mad. If you're upset by something, you have to man up and say it. If you're struggling, if you're scared, you have to man up and say it. Like for me, part of what stemmed like I've always I don't know why, there's no reason for it. I've always been terrified of going to the doctor. Okay.
Okay.
6 weeks in the hospital, still didn't cure it. I still get nervous going to the doctor. Well, I tried to hide from that. I tried to run from it by making excuses to just not go. Well, that leads you to becoming 500 pounds and about to die, basically. It turns out, if you don't take care of yourself, bad stuff happens.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Well, that falls into the honesty piece, though. because you have to be honest with your spouse, but you also have to be honest with yourself. And so to be a good husband, I always start there because
Okay.
you have to be trustworthy. You have to be someone that your wife can trust.
Right.
And the only way that you can be that person is if you are honest with her and with yourself. So I start there. From there, the next thing is you have to be someone that she knows she's going to be willing to put her trust in you. And so I will go a step further and say, you're going to be able to take care of her physically, emotionally, financially, all of those things, you know. And we were talking about this on our space last week, the Lord of X space. You know, we were saying like, if you like, we're starting this online business, right? We're all trying to build some type of thing online. Well,
Yeah.
in order for our wife to be on board with doing that, we have to have earned her trust that we're going to provide what's best for our family. And
Right.
so I think that's the next part of it. So you've got honesty, you've got the trust. She has to be willing to give herself to you. And then I think it's a service based leadership is the next thing. You know, like you have to be the leader of your home, but you have to do it through service to everyone else in the home. Like they have to know that no matter what else is going on, no matter what crap life is throwing at them, dad slash the husband has this under control. I feel safe and I feel protective and I feel supported because dad is here or because my husband is here, you know?
Yeah.
And I think if you can do those things, everything else sort of finds a way to sort of intermix into those and it starts to work from there.
Okay, so what would you say to the typical guy who's like, you talk to him at a birthday party or a barbecue and he says, he complains about his wife and says, "Ah, my wife's on my ass again, asking me to do this and do that." And yeah, things are good. Oh, he wasn't like he used to be. You know what I mean? We don't have sex anymore. Maybe once a month or once every 2 months,
Right.
or we fight all the time. You know how it is, right, Jake? What do you say to that? How do you help a guy like that?
So the biggest thing for me is like, you know, we talk about how we're gonna be the leaders of the home. So in order to be the leader, you have to earn the right to be able to lead. You have to earn the trust of the people who are you're trying to lead in your home. And so the first thing I always and this comes up actually somewhat regularly. I'll talk even like with friends. And the first thing I say is like, well, what are you doing to fix it? And then always the reaction is, well, but she, it's always her this, she that. I was like, no, no, no. What are you doing to fix this?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, they're always in some form. It always comes back to, well, what the hell do you mean? What am I doing? I'm telling you, and it's like, okay, and I write about this all the time. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so let's talk about this. So you're fighting and arguing all the time. Okay, when's the last time you actually listened to her without your phone or without the TV on and had an open, honest conversation about something meaningful in her life? When's the last time you talked to her about something other than what was related to the kids? When was the last time that you openly listened whenever she talked to you about something that she was scared about or that she was nervous about? When's the last time you shared with her something that really matters to you other than getting laid? You know, when was the last time that you openly shared with her something that, is really meaningful to you that really gets your needle moved forward? Which brings to the next thing. What exactly are you doing to push your needle forward? Like, what are you doing in your life that has value or that has significance? Because a lot of people, it's like, they're working jobs, not careers. They're not
Yeah.
really doing anything impactful. Then they go home and all they do is freaking watch Netflix all night. And it's like, so what's causing you to be your best? And it's like they just look at you like, you're an alien, you've got three eyes or something. And it's like, well, seriously, man, like, what are you doing to get her excited about you leading her? Like, what are you doing to make her proud of you? And then they'll say, like, well, I mean, what the hell you mean? Why she's not my mom? Why should she be proud of me? It's like,
Oh man.
bro, your wife is the most important person in the world. Like, more important than your parents, more important than your children. Your wife is the number one person. And it's like, okay, well, Okay. And it's like,
They
so
think you're
what are you
crazy.
doing to make that happen? Yeah. So it's like, so what are you doing to make that happen? You know, it's like, oh, you've only had sex once in the last month or once in the last 2 months. Why do you think that is? You know, and this is where like the thread that I wrote a while back.
Yeah,
Because I've told people this in real, I've had this conversation in real life. You know, it's kind of the what you see is what you get kind of thing.
sure.
It's like, let me just tell you this. No one, including your wife, has that many headaches. I'm just going to tell you that.
Hmm.
Nobody has that many headaches. Okay. You want to know when my wife had a lot of headaches? When I was 500 pounds. My wife had a lot of headaches, you know, whenever I was 500 pounds. Or
Yeah.
for that matter, if you've not done shit around the house except lay down and watch TV, why would she want to have sex with you? You know, why would she want to be intimate with you when you've shown her no intimacy whatsoever? And then, of course, that goes into, and we can get into this if you want to, but like obviously the difference between men and women on how they get to intimacy, which is drastically different. And most people, men especially, do not understand that whatsoever. You know, and so those are the types of conversations that I have, like whenever I hear people say that, because I always believe that the answer should be, well, what can I do more of, or what can I do better? You know, because the
Yeah.
moment that you start taking ownership of things, the more empowered you become, and the less you are to just act like a whiny little bitch, basically. You know, because that's what it is. Like guys are just wandering around whining about the things that aren't going their way, but they're not interested in doing anything to fix it. You know, like
Is it
in
do you
all
think
aspects.
it's because they're lazy, or again it comes back to the lazy thing? Is it because you think they're lazy, or they just don't even realize that they have a problem? They think automatically the problem lies within their wives.
I think it's a combination of those. I think there's definitely a lot of laziness. Complacency is also the word I like to use a lot
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
You know, people get complacent. You know,
Yeah.
when you're first dating, you're going out of your way to date, to be exciting, to be spontaneous. You know, you're probably having sex all the time. You know, you're doing all these things. And then you get kids. And it's such a wild thing, you know. The more kids you get, that usually coincides with you're advancing in your job, your career, you're taking higher level positions, which probably is more money, but it's also probably more work and it's more responsibility, more stress. And you just kind of get complacent. And what ends up happening is your marriage is what gets sacrificed because it gets taken for granted. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
well, we're married. She's always going to be there. So I'll worry about, you know, my job because that's providing money. And well, I'm giving you money, so you should be satisfied with that. And it's like, well, true, but I mean, like, you know, money's not everything. I mean, it's important, but you know, it certainly doesn't help your connection. You know,
No.
that's not how you build intimacy by having money. I mean, you know, that's not really how it works. And so I think complacency is the root cause of a lot of it. And then I think there's a lot of guys that are very misguided as to what they think that it looks like to have a successful marriage. You know, I think so many guys have issues with like porn addiction, you know, where they see that and it's like, well, that's how it is. And it's like, come on, bro, like that is not
That's
how it is.
delusional.
Like, exactly. You know, and we're like living, like people are like living in this like fantasy world. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, that's not like, you know, that's not how this works, you know.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It takes effort, it takes commitment, you know. But my answer is always, well, what can you do more of? You know, like as the husband, you call yourself the leader of the family. You're supposed to be the head of the household. So then what are you doing? Like, what are you doing to fix the problem? The old like saying is, well, you know, like attitude reflects leadership. So if you're saying your wife does not have a positive attitude towards your marriage, what did you do to cause that? You know, and it starts there, you know, because that's what we can control.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into it then. How do you build intimacy with your wife? And I know, obviously, look, it's not a one size fits all type of thing. Every woman will have their own love language, like they say. But what are sort of like the general tips you would give to guys that are trying to get more intimate with their wives because it's lacking in their relationship at the moment?
Well, the first thing, Brent, you mentioned the love languages, and that's a big thing. And I think more and more people are starting to become aware of the love languages. The one thing that people kind of get confused on, though, is that, you know, we have a tendency to express love in the way that we want to receive it. So, like with the love languages, you know, like if I'm a physical touch person, I'm going to be physically touching my spouse because that's what I want to receive. Or
Right.
if I'm an acts of service person, I'm going to do all these acts of service for my spouse because that's what I actually want. And so the first thing that people get a lot of times get wrong is that you have to not only know what you're wanting, but you have to understand what your spouse wants, and that's how you have to serve them. You know, I am a physical touch person and a quality time person. That's my two big ones. My wife is a very big acts of service person. And it took me for a long time to figure out because I'm like coming up and I'm hugging her and I'm kissing her and I'm, just putting my arms around her and I'm, just constantly wanting to spend time together and all these things. And it's like, I mean, and she's like, well, it's nice, like all this, and it's like, but it wasn't like necessarily like getting the desired effect. And then it's like, but like if I'm doing a bunch of stuff and checking off a bunch of boxes around our house, getting different things taken care of, like there's a lot of times where I can't keep my wife like off of me, because like that is her love language. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, men associate intimacy physically. It's all about the physical
Yeah.
connection. Women get to a place of intimacy emotionally,
Yeah.
and that takes more work, it takes more effort, but it's like, if you're not fulfilling her needs emotionally, she's not fulfilling your needs physically.
It takes
That's just how
putting
it is.
put this down and actually look at her and listen to her, right?
You got to put the phone down, you got to stop watching TV for a while. You have to not always be the one talking about your problems, but listen to her problems, understanding there's times where she just wants you to listen. It's funny, I just finished a communication guide that I'm going to be releasing later this week for people that they're interested in it, and it's going to be free for at least for now. And I talk a lot about this in more detail, where it's like, you have to actually listen and understand there's a lot of times that's all she wants you to do. There are times where she wants you to solve her problems, and there's times where she wants you to just listen and be a listening ear so that she can vent, get it off of her chest, and then she's
Yeah.
fine. And you got to understand the difference, and you have to accept the differences when they're there. But that's how you get to a place of intimacy. You have to continually pursue her and fulfill the needs that she has if you want her to fulfill the needs that you have. There's no way around it. Like, I don't make the rules. This is just how we are. This is in our DNA,
Yeah.
If you want what you want, then you have to be willing to do what she needs and wants as well.
How much of it do you think is also based on keep dating your wife? Or is it the day-to-day stuff? Like you said, we mentioned, being serviceable, listening to her, being attentive, helping her out, being supportive. Or is it, and it could be both, obviously, but I'm just wondering, like, which one is it more? Because a lot of guys will say, well, you know what, we don't have time to date like we used to. We're not 20 anymore. We got kids, we got jobs, other obligations. I don't have time to take my wife out to dinner. So the answer to
Yeah,
that would be, well, it doesn't have to be in the form of a dinner on Friday night in a restaurant. It could be taking 15 minutes out of your day to go for a walk, or having coffee together in the morning or whenever.
right. Absolutely. So I think the short answer is it requires both. It's the day to day and it's the dating. So here's how I describe it. Like if you think about building like a fire, like if you build a fire in a fireplace, okay, the day to day stuff, serving her, giving her, fulfilling her needs, doing the things that make her happy and make her feel loved and valued. That is like the kindling, and you build the wood, and you build the base of the fire, and you even put like the accelerant on the fire. Even we'll go ahead and say that doing the dating and being exciting and being spontaneous and being adventurous and living a life that is all of those things. That's like the spark that'll to light the match that makes the whole thing go. Okay, you
Yeah.
need both. You can't have a fire without the wood and the kindling and all those things, but you also can't have the fire without the match either. You have to have both.
Right.
Otherwise, you're only getting half of the puzzle, and that's how I equate it for people. And you're right, dating is a relative term. You know, I refuse to accept or believe that there's anyone who doesn't have the time. Okay,
Yeah.
even like if you believe that, then again, you're go back to what I said earlier. You're just lying to yourself, and you're honestly kind of just being a little bitch, basically. um, because everyone has time to fit it in their day. Now, what does it look like? That's where it could be different for everyone. Okay.
Sure.
We had twin boys that were even when they were babies. You know what our date nights were sometimes? Sitting on the couch and just cuddling and watching something, or sitting on the floor and having a carpet picnic for dinner after the kids went to bed. Like, don't confuse yourself into thinking that there's not time. There
Right.
is. It just takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of creativity. And if you do those things, you'll be fine. And by the way, um, you know, that kind of kills two birds with one stone, because you're doing the dating and also like you're doing something fun and exciting. Like, there was one time where my wife was like, all right, the boys are in bed, they're asleep. I'm gonna go jump in the shower. All right, cool. When she got out, I had already then had like the like, it was not even a carpet picnic. It was like a bed picnic. Like, I just had stuff laid out on the bed, so we could just sit on the bed, hang out, and just like have like our dinner finally. Because it was after the kids had gone to bed and she was gonna get in the shower. I was like, oh, we quickly got some stuff together, and that was what we did. So she gets out of the shower, and that's what she finds. And it's like, well, you know, now we have our date night, and we have something totally unexpected, that she didn't think that was going to happen, had no clue that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, you think that I didn't get laid that night? Like, come on, like, it takes care of everything, like
Yeah,
it
for
just
sure.
takes the effort. And it's just like, it, as a football coach, a mentor of mine way back when I first started coaching, he said something that really stayed with me, and it doesn't even just apply to coaching. This literally applies to every aspect of your life. And he was talking about kids like coming out for the team, but what he said was, if it matters to you, you'll find a way to do it. Because the thing was, like, kids were like showing up to practice late, or that type of stuff, and he would just always say, listen, if it matters to you, you'll find a way to get it done. And that always stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I don't even think about it in terms of coaching anymore. I think about it just in my own day-to-day operations. Like, if this matters to me, I'm going to find a way to make it happen. Like, okay, like this podcast, I knew this was going to happen. I wanted to do this. So like, I made sure that I had this time set aside. And if some emergency came up, it wouldn't just be like, oh, sorry, bro, like I just can't do it. It would be, hey, this came up. I'm not gonna be able to do it tonight. When is the next good time that we can do it? Because I want to do it,
Sure.
that type of stuff. Those are two totally different things. If it didn't matter, well, then you might just blow it off, or you're a no-show, like that type of stuff. So that always has stuck with me. If it matters to you, you'll find a way to get it done.
Yeah, for sure. Because then what's the alternative, Like you're living with this person like pretty much
Yeah.
24/7, and for the
Right.
rest of your life, like you agreed upon. So
Hmm.
what do you want to have like a miserable atmosphere at home, an environment? And then also like what kind of message does that send to your kids, that you're not dating their mother, you're not treating her with respect, you're not a fun guy, you're not taking care of her and being attentive to her feelings and all that. What kind of message are you sending to your kids at the same time? You have to model the behavior, right? Like we always say that. You got to show it
Absolutely.
because then they're gonna internalize it, and that's how they're gonna treat their future wives.
That's it. And that's actually one of the things, like we had talked about earlier, like, thinking in terms of like generational change. Um, I always in the past, like Jake 1.0, I was always like trying to be a good husband, but like the difference now is like with Jake 2.0, it's not just trying to be a good husband, but I'm trying to set the standard for my sons, for the type of husband I want them to be. And I'm setting the bar for what I expect my daughter to accept. I don't want her to accept anything less than the standard that I'm showing.
Yeah.
I tell people the story, and they always laugh. This has been a few months ago now, but my wife and I were on the phone with our daughter, and she was like half like somewhat dating this guy, and she said she broke up with him, doesn't have anything to do with him anymore. And when we asked why, she's like, well, he would always call me or text me or Snapchat me when he was supposed to be at work, but he wasn't at work because he was showing up late all the time. And she's like, I can't be with someone with a lousy work ethic like that. And it's like,
Wow.
job well done. Like, that's a proud dad moment right there.
That's awesome.
And that is why we have to uphold a standard, because it's about our legacy. That is the whole, like, when I chose like Dad Dynasty as kind of like a title, one, I'm an English teacher, so the alliteration has always been something that is appealing to me. But it's like that word dynasty is really impactful to me because it's not just, oh, hey, raise a family. We're not just raising a family here. We're trying to create a family dynasty so that for generations to come, my children and grandchildren and great grandchildren will be teaching their grandchildren the standards and the values and the principles that we established right here now in this moment. And I think if more men thought that way, and not just thought about it, but really embraced that, I think a lot more men would take it more seriously because it's like, when you're gone, like what do you want to leave behind?
Yeah.
And if that matters to you, you're gonna figure out a way to leave behind something more than, well, dad laid his ass on the couch, ate Cheetos, and watched Netflix. Like that was dad, like the hell with that. I don't want that for my legacy. I don't want
Me
my
neither, man.
family to be that. I want them, I want my boys to go marry women that are, in the future and extend this family and branch it out and to keep growing. I want my daughter to go find a man to marry, and I want her to carry on, even though she probably won't have our last name anymore, to still carry on our values and principles because it's still, that's how it keeps growing that way.
Jake, thank you so much for your time. Tell people, where can we find you? What are you working on right now? And what do you offer that you can help for guys or anybody that's looking for help in relationships?
Yeah, so there's several things. First of all, on Twitter, if you look up Dad Dynasty, that's easier than my first and my last name. If you just search Dad Dynasty, you'll find me. And then in my bio page, you'll find a link that you can sign up for the newsletter that we do. We send out 2 newsletter issues a week. We do like kind of like a deep dive on Tuesdays that covers whatever space that we're going to be doing that night, the topic. And then on Thursdays, it's usually more of like a story based uh, newsletter issue that we do. We're releasing a book that's actually out now. It's called the Dad Fit Dynasty Manual. We have over 200 pages completed, and it's going to eventually be 366 pages. So it's like a daily guide that has like a story with a lesson, and then there's what's really cool about it is every single day there's like an action that like you have to do to kind of implement that day's lesson. So
Okay.
every single day you read the lesson, then you have like a task to complete that reinforces that day's lesson, which is really cool. And you can find the links to that in my bio. And it's newsletter.dadfitdynasty.com. And then the other thing, the big thing that we're the Dad Fit Dynasty, myself and Barrett Nobel, we are hosting our first annual men's retreat this summer, July 5th through the 8th. And it's going to be in the Catskill Mountains up in upstate New York. And basically, we're just going to get a group of guys together. I think there's like 5 or 6 spots left at this point. And we're going to go hiking and kayaking. We're going to sit around the campfire and just talk more like this type of stuff, what it means to be a husband, to be a father, to build a family legacy, a family dynasty, what that looks like in the modern age. And again, you can find links to all that in the bio. And if you just search like Dad Fit Dynasty, you can find the links to all that stuff too. So I also like I'm open up to DMs. Like we're like in the early stages of building. We're in the process of working on building a school community, which is going to be school.dadfitdynasty.com, where
Right.
we're going to have some like just free resources, and there's also going to be a paid tier on there that people can get additional things for the paid monthly membership, and then extending that into doing like one-on-one and group coaching for guys that think we're covering fitness of all varieties. If you're looking for physical fitness improvement, Barrett's got you covered. If you're looking for like marriage or fatherhood improvement, I've got you covered. Between the two of us, like it's like an individualized thing, no matter like what exactly it is that you're looking for. So it's exciting. Like we're doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
We're trying to give something for everybody, whether you got, just a few dollars to grab the book, if you've got no money at all and just wanted to get the free newsletter, or if you want to go like kind of the top level thing and go spend 4 days with us out in the mountains and do just manly shit, then you could do that as well. So
Lots of good stuff, man. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.